sanctuary.
And you are tuned right into MIMS Radio from the beautiful studios at the Phi Center in the heart of Old Montreal. Right now, we're going to be diving into Game Changer. This is where we get deep into conversation with people behind the scenes in the music industry who you may not hear a lot about, but who really shape the scope of how we listen to and engage with music. So today, I have the pleasure of chatting with the one and only Patti Schmidt. She's been involved in Canada's independent and underground music community for more than 25 years, doing everything from running labels, performing, making radio, and programming events. She was the longtime host on Brave New Waves, the very influential and important radio program here in Canada. She, and most recently and over the last few years, has been a curator, editor, and producer of the MUTEC Electronic Music and Digital Creativity Festival based right here in Montreal. Welcome to the show, Patti.
Thanks for having me, Tash, and nice to see you in this context.
It's really good to see. This is honestly, I have to say, a slight fangirl dream come true, because you are truly one of my music heroes in the city, as somebody who's listened to Brave New Waves incessantly in my youth, and obviously have been a fan of MUTEC for a number of years. It's just absolutely wonderful to have you in here.
Thank you. But we've also known each other for a while. This is not our first chit chat.
No. I'm happy to say that I can call you a friend and somebody who, you know, we've been connected over the years through different
It might
guises.
be 20 years, Tash.
Are you for real?
Just think about it.
Yeah, it could very well be that. But let's go back. So let's do the little, like, you know, static screen fading back. How did you go from being, I guess, like a music fan to being somebody who really works on how people listen to music?
Luck and perseverance. Lots of luck at the beginning. I didn't really actually know that music could be such a powerful force in my life until I was probably 14 or 15 years old. My mom was a big music listener. She had her favorites, a decent record collection, and I would see that she would obsessively listen to some things. And I could see over that there was some power to music, but I wasn't particularly touched by much until I discovered college radio. And it was CKCU in Ottawa that I started listening to, and then I found a few nerd boyfriends in high school where we would go and buy records collectively and then swap tape them. And I traveled through contemporary genres pretty quickly in high school with the matching bad haircuts and thrift store clothes that went along with it. And became a big part of my identity to understand contemporary stuff. But I wasn't really that loyal to any particular genre. So I would skip through, ska month and then goth month, and you would think that those were incompatible, but you could really make your clothes work in all of those phases. And so it became a really important thing for me. I was actually kind of an athlete at this time, if you can believe it. And somehow I managed to have a friend of mine, Sean, do the music for figure skating warm-ups. And so there's nothing like...
You were a figure skater?
I was.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I'll send photos.
Please do.
It all fell apart because of rock and roll.
Cautionary tale.
Yeah, so nothing like warming up to Meat is Murder, when those records came out. So that was really great. And so I was obsessed with college radio. I also had stumbled upon Brave New Waves and sort of late night dial tuning. Radio was the most dominant medium in my house, but not anything public radio or culturally attuned. My mom listened to a lot of country music. My dad listened to a lot of right-wing radio and polka on the community stations. And so I was aware that there was this whole other world, and it was the delivery system for new music, in the mid-'80s. A little bit of the video stuff, like the new music, was starting on late-night television, but it was really radio that was the big lead for me. So the first thing I did when I came to McGill in 1987 is they were just getting the FM license for CKUT that first year.
What year was this?
87. So I registered, and then I walked down to the radio station very sheepishly and without any confidence, and sort of asked for a job or tried to find a way in. Plus, I just really wanted access to their record collection. They didn't give me a show first year, but I started doing some radio in super wonks, kind of a yeller, but also really interested in research and putting together interesting things and riding the wave of what was contemporary at any given time. And sometime in that process, Nadine Jelena was the station manager, and she had been filling in for Brent Bambury at Brave New Ways from time to time, and so she recommended 5 or 6 of us to go and do an audition. We all went down there to the big studios, totally alienating, kind of a booth like this. You can't touch the records, though, at the CBC. Terrible audition. Everyone did terrible auditions, but I rewrote whatever they had given me to read, and I ended up getting a 1-week job as a researcher, which turned into a 13-week contract, which then turned into all kinds of other things that followed from that.
So this is like early 90s.
Yeah, so in 1990, I did a 1 week on air. That was terrifying. I don't know. I mean, when they first called me to come do the audition, too, I almost said no. I was just
Why?
I wasn't a big personality like Brent. What an intimidating program, so important. You have to have a certain kind of charisma. I'm not sure I ever developed that charisma, but
Come on.
No, but it's more, I think, more the connection to music that saved me in the end. So yeah, I did a fill-in. I was sort of kind of their back burner fill-in idea for a number of years. But the most powerful thing that I got to do early on was around 92, 93, as I became the record buyer for the program. So I would go up to Old Cargo Records, the distributor, and people like Jeff Way would be there and Linus, and they would all rush me with what they wanted to hear on air also, because they were a lot of the weird records.
That would have been huge, actually, for being able to play some artists on national airwaves.
Exactly. So I bought and tended for that library for the entire duration of the program after that.
Wow.
And then 1994.
What was your budget? I have to ask.
Really teeny, but still a few $1,000s can go a long way when you're buying wholesale. And we had a really kind of amazing semi-illegal, well, I guess a slush fund is illegal, but we would get sent tons and tons of CDs, and they were actually had resale value for many years. A lot of major label stuff they would never ever play, and so we would also be able to squeeze another couple $1,000s a year out of reselling that stuff. So yeah, and making stickers and T-shirts out of our little slush fund of CDs we would never play. So 1995, Brent went to TV. There was big budget cuts. There were about 6.5 people working on the program when I was a researcher there, and we were down to 3 in 1995. And it just seemed to make sense that I could do my own research and pick my own music and then go on air. And that's what happened. Some things fell by the wayside. The program was famous for doing one really awesome long-form interview with an artist, a filmmaker, writer, musician, whatever. That was once a day. That was changed to once a week because it was there's a lot of resources to get your act together to make a good hour-long interview. And lots of music all over the place. 20 hours of radio a week meant you didn't have to repeat yourself. In fact, the person who listens to late night radio is probably going to be a regular listener. And yeah, we were very aware of this kind of profile of, the insomniac, retired person, the weirdo artist, the student, the cab driver, whoever they were. This is how you use radio at that time of night.
So you were selecting music to really speak to different segments of your
Yes and no. It was an amazing program because the demographic spread was so large. And they were so curious and open, and so you could go anywhere, and we went everywhere in a program. Best hate mail ever. What is that styrofoam cup torture that you're playing? I thought something was dragging under my car. It's sound art. Everyone calm down.
Was that the feedback at the time that was really just letters? I
have so many letters. So when they closed the show, and it was all written by hand, a lot of the other programs at CBC would be a little bit jealous of us because there was so much feedback, and their programs didn't get that kind of feedback.
How many letters a week were you guys getting? Do you remember?
At peak point, I would say that there would be upwards of 20 a week, but people had to take time to get a pen, write out a letter. There'd be a lot of illustrations, questions, a lot of this kind of confessional idea of how important knowing about this kind of music is to them. A lot of artists made them feel also validated that, oh my God, there's a weird electroacoustic scene in Saskatoon, or whatever it was.
Well, so that's interesting too, because you're threading together these almost these communities weren't really speaking to each other too much. I mean, this is sort of early days of the internet.
No internet.
Very early.
Well, very early. Yeah. I think we had an email address in 93. And I don't think we had a functional website till 96, 7, 8, somewhere in there. I don't remember.
Wow.
And we went outside for that. Like, we didn't even rely on the CBC to build our website. So when they closed down the show, all of those letters were kept, all of the original scripts that were done on typewriters on like triple carbon. I have all that stuff in my basement. And I think that one day it might make a really interesting book because it is really visual stuff too. There's a lot of crazy writing, crazy illustration, and just funny, beautiful human stories about how music touches people.
That would be an incredible document. I mean, there's been some documentation now with the show. Recently, there was some sort of like series of live studio recordings.
Yeah, those predate me. Those were like really like 80s. Were they? They were before I was there, and it's when the program still had a budget and was trying to do sessions. So they were recorded sessions that were big budget kinds of things. We just ended up only being able to stretch our tiny recording budget into capturing live recordings, and then kind of making deals with artists for special things from time to time.
What was a special thing with an artist that you made a deal with?
Well, like Owen Pallett, do you know him, the violin player? So at the beginning of his career, it's like, hey, Owen, I have $100 if you want to do a commission for the radio show. And he did. Like just a little piece of music, you know, that kind of stuff.
And so what kind of shows were you guys recording, like going out to capture at that time?
Everything, all genres. There were a lot of things that came from Victoriaville, the new music festival, indie rock things, as well as electronic music concerts, which in 1999, 2000, where, I mean, there's disparaging attitudes towards laptop music and that sort of thing, but we were airing them and people would be like, well, what's live about that? It's just press and play and, you know. But a lot of super interesting things, and it's live. There was that Herbert concert, you know, what he did with the sampling of the McDonald's packages and stuff, and this was a lot of collaboration that I did with Mutech when I was still at CBC.
Mutech launched in 2004?
2000. But there was a kind of precursor to it that Alain started called the Media Lounge, which went from 95 to 2000.
But you continued on with Brave New Waves until it was 2007?
2007. It kind of was completely finished in May of 2006, which was the last time that all staff was there. And we all knew that they were wrapping the program up and that they were renovating the network and all of that. And I knew that there would be this particular date where it would be the last time that all of us would be together, a very small team of 3.5 people. And so we did a last show without permission from the CBC.
What do you mean without permission?
They got a lot of hate mail about the upcoming understanding that the program was going to be canceled. And they didn't have good answers for it. And they didn't, and we were angry too a little bit.
Of course.
But,
I mean, that was a slap in the face, I think, for anybody who was in love with that program.
I think it really hurt music communities and all kinds of things that they didn't acknowledge properly.
What was the mood leading up to that? Like, did you have a sense that they were making these changes without them actually articulating it?
Oh, they did studies.
They were data driven, were they? Okay.
Yes, they were data driven. So I knew there would be a last show. I knew there would be no goodbye that was going to be forthcoming from any of the way that the CBC was going to deal with this. So we did a last show, and it was all about songs about radio, a live concert, and then the last hour of the show, which is usually one piece of music that we would pick. I labored over what that was supposed to be for like months. I knew it was going to be a significant wrap-up, and I also compiled a list of every single person who'd ever been contracted to work on that show. It was like 25 names or something. And so at the end of that program, we can talk about the last piece of music later, or now, I don't know.
We can jump into that, and then we can continue on the journey.
So the last piece of music that I decided would be kind of perfect and would have that arty melancholy and all of those elements to it was an hour of William Basinski's Disintegration Loops. It's come to be a piece of music or 4 albums that are associated with 9/11. But at the time, and it was because he was in a residency in Manhattan at the time that the incident happened, but he was doing a technique where he was trying to save a bunch of analog tape recordings he had, and he was noticing that the magnetic tape was flaking off the more he re-recorded it, and so he created a piece of music out of that, which just is disintegration personified. And it's a record that we played a lot. They first came out in like 2003, 2004. And so that was the last piece of music. And then at the very end of the show where we do the credits, I actually listed everyone who had participated in the program over the years. And then I got called into an executive's office a couple of days later and was asked if I had done a final program, and I lied. I said no, but the Wikipedia page, somebody put like, oh, and the final show just aired. And I was like, oh my God, I went in the behind the scenes thing. I was like, hey, everyone, please, not yet. We're not ready. So, and that was it. And then it kind of lived on in this pastiche, collage-y form for another many months, which was sad.
Yeah, they brought in some different, I remember just, the slow disintegration of the show.
Yeah.
So let's listen to this piece from William Basinki. What's it called?
They don't really have titles, but it's I think it's from the 4th version of Disintegration Loops. And again, the significance of this and its association with 9/11 sort of evolved a few years later. And so there was a big 9 LP reissue of this on the 10th anniversary.
So here we are, William Basinki on MIMS Radio. MIMS Radio, we were just listening to a piece from William Basinki from the Disintegration Loops, Volume 4, I guess you would call that. And I have Patti Schmidt here in the studio with me, our game changer, joining us for this edition of the show. So we're chatting about the era that was Brave New Waves. And but then your journey as a curator continued, just in a different guise.
And so again, luck and perseverance, I think, are behind that too.
So you had mentioned earlier that Alain is the founder of MUTEC, but he had been working on a festival of sorts.
It was a festival of new cinema and media, and they used to have a thing called the Media Lounge, and they used to really showcase new media, like in 95, 2000, beginning of the laptop as an instrument for music and visual arts, exciting times.
And you had a hand in doing some of the
No, I was a collaborator. So we would tape things there and broadcast them.
So how did you come on board officially with the MUTEC team?
Well, I had a relationship with MUTEC and Alain's projects for a while, and then so the program ended in 2007. I went and did a master's degree in 2008, and around that time, it was kind of a loose invitation to come and consult a little bit more about the programming, and he would hear my opinions in the years before anyway. And so that's just how that evolved, and I do what is my title now? A programmer, artistic and content development. So I write some grants, and I follow some of the special projects that we bring to the festival, things last year, like the NTS radio showcases, and this year it'll be the Key Change project.
Mm-hmm. We're going to jump into the Key Change thing in a little bit, because I am very curious about your time, because you're like, yeah, well, I do this, but it's like, but no, you've had a tremendous impact on bringing music to audiences with artists that nobody's ever really heard of, and presenting them in a context that is really, much more visceral than I guess you could say, like what you were doing on radio. What was it about curating live electronic music that really kind of...
It was definitely a kind of mind frame that I had to adjust to, because choosing recorded music that's awesome is pretty easy. But trying to program live electronic music and having seen it or an opinion of it or seen how it lives in spaces with audiences was something definitely to learn. So really great producer does not always make for a really great live show. So, I mean, it's just true. I guess it happens with bands as well. And there's a different kind of charisma that is required on stage or in the music to make people turned on or connect with live electronic music. I mean, the size of rooms matters, sitting, standing, the type of PA, the type of spatial sound, presentation, all of that stuff comes into play. And so it's still a really interesting learning process. The tools are changing all the time. My understanding and sense and opinions have developed, of course. But it was a really nice adjustment to make. And it also means that you have to travel a lot to go see stuff.
Of course. Yeah, so I was curious about like what your discovery process has been like in this, guys, this phase of your career. So traveling to festivals, I mean, what else?
I still cruise and buy a lot of music. I still buy music, like actual dollars, because I'm not going to listen to it unless I've chosen it. I just know that. And there's only a certain number of hours in the day. And so it starts with the spark of, oh my God, this producer or artist has an amazing sensibility or aesthetic or musicality or whatever, or innovation. And then I start poking around and hope that there's a possible live show that would happen from this. And sometimes we take chances. It's much easier to take chances on emerging artists than whoever we call our headliner or anchor in a program, because we hope they deliver and that they sell tickets. But yeah, most of my interest is actually at the bottom half of a program where all of these possibilities exist, where if I'm really turned on by something, I would love to put that in front of people and have them be turned on by it as well. And I feel like over the years, I've developed a persuasive quality where I drag people into my world and, wait for them to have a nice reaction.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the things I'm always curious about regarding programming for festivals or curating, artists for those spaces is what's the responsibility, I guess, a festival has towards like focusing on emerging talent. Because that's it. I mean, these are people who don't have a name yet. I mean, what is it that you're looking for? Like, what excites you in somebody that you're like, oh, I see a seed here?
I think it's different for different genres, and sometimes you're even surprised yourself. Yeah, I don't know.
Just that inexplicable something.
Yeah, just that tickle feeling, Sometimes I'm overwhelmed by it and I'm just certain, that this is going to be good, no matter what. And the impulse to share.
And I feel like, something that you've been like a big driver in within that festival is making sure that there's, a little bit more parity or a bit more visibility for women and female-identified performers. And that's been something, I guess, since I think the festival's doing okay before then, but this is something that's been a real part of your vision, I guess, in there.
I've become lippier and harpier over the years, for sure, because you can't help noticing when there are omissions. And trying to develop my argumentation with Vince and Alain to, make a difference, make a change, convince people. Certainly something that has become even more important over the last couple of years, because there's part of my soul that was like exhausted by these arguments and maybe not so well trained in how to be persuasive about this sort of thing, other than just, outrage or it's just right. So yeah, we've done better in the last few years. We're definitely at the point where once you start noticing, you can't stop noticing. And so I think that's the first step to changing things. The other second step is to realize that we're not in the room with all the best people already, that there's more than one room, and that you actually, in the house, there's many rooms. And the people in the other rooms know about the big room where everybody thinks all the best people already, but they're not even going to try to get in because it's too exhausting for them, or there's too many barriers or too many sets of stairs to go up. I'm running with this analogy. And so, yeah, I mean, it's work for me too. I mean, I don't have at my fingertips a definitive list of all of the amazing women who happen to make music too. And the discussion has evolved into this project that we're part of called Key Change, which was spearheaded by PRS Foundation in the UK, who I liken to Factor in a way. So they're an agency that funds emerging artists for albums and tours and international showcases. And so it's been germinating for the last couple of years, and it includes 6 European festivals, more showcase-type festivals, the South by Southwest style. So we're labels and the music industry, which in the more literal sense of it are involved. I'm not sure I count MUTEC as the music industry in that way. So they all agreed that they would create a cohort of 60 women, so 30 artists and 30 innovators and female cultural workers or women who are making a difference in their various music industries in their countries. And the project understands that when you create a real physical embodied network, that this is how you counter, change, or just create another force. So everything else is the way that the world is also based on networks and social networks and nepotism and, privileges and all of those sorts of things. So it's a smart move to create a real physical group, a cohort of women to travel and play these festivals. We're the North American partner. We're going to be hosting 6 of the women from the European Key Change partners, and then we're going to build it out, and we're going to include a lot of Canadian, Quebec-based artists, and hopefully a Latin American cohort of women as well, who will connect with the MUTEC in Mexico and in Buenos Aires. A couple of days of symposium, some creative labs, and trying to provide some resources for them as well.
So part of this Key Change thing that I think that sort of, I guess, grab the headline more so than this whole, building of a network, is the fact that it would, I guess the aim would be for gender parity with these partner festivals by 2022. And a lot of the questions that have been posed around that is like, okay, well, this is wonderful, but why is it going to take so long to get there? Why can't we get there faster?
Yeah. I mean, it's a pledge they all signed. Not to make excuses, but I do think, and I've found in my experience, that everything is a process. It takes a while also to figure out how to do different research. It takes a while to figure out how to find the other rooms where the women and people of color and trans and non-binary folk are, and they're there. We know this. I mean, I've never seen so much visibility in my music career. So, yeah, I think that's the trick. I think it's fair. If we get there faster, that's amazing. Like the NFB got there faster than they thought they were going to get there with their gender parity pledge. And yeah, I think it all looks bright.
I mean, I know this is such a beaten, question, but the fact that this conversation, I agree. I mean, I haven't seen this kind of widespread conversation around, what's been happening with women and other, sort of disadvantaged folks within music and, I mean, every sphere of society, really, being as, I guess, vocal and as like a part, I guess, of this. It feels like we're in a bit of a cultural moment right now. Do you think this is something that's going to stick?
God, I hope so. It's really taken a lot to muster all of my energy to get back on the horse here. Yeah. So I hope so. I actually have a lot of faith in 20-year-olds. That's kind of been a bit of an inspiration for me to start arguing. And now that I'm a bit older, I have so much less to lose. So I can really dangle out there like a bad smell or be annoying or whatever it is. I don't feel like there's any. Sure, there's going to be a tax on that, and there have been incidents where I have been socially taxed for some of my opinions, but whatever.
I love it. Nothing to lose, everything to gain.
Yeah.
You had a really great quote. God, and I didn't note this down, but there was a conversation happening on Facebook earlier in the week. I think you addressed something that Boley had shared, an article from Journal de Montréal, and how did you phrase it? It was just like, we've had to put up with, great men and mediocre men for millennia. Surely we can put up with some mediocre women as we're trying to beat down the doors here a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's half a joke and half not a joke.
Right.
I think was it Carqua, that guy, the article? And then there was a woman who was defending him and not understanding her own role in enjoying the power of her position in patriarchy. How often you say that word on this show.
5 times fast.
It's this argument about, artistic merit or talent. It's like, it's really problematic because, first of all, it's not scientific. It's all subjective, and all subjectivity is based on a whole bunch of biases that come into play. So maybe somebody who's not talented might squeak in, but for the most part, the argument assumes if you open the doors that it's just going to be flooded with untalented people, and it's just bunk.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's used as sort of like an excuse.
Exactly.
To keep the status quo.
And the other one that's used as an excuse is the idea of like, well, if we put all these women on stage, we're not going to sell tickets. It's like, okay, well, what's your control group?
Yeah, well, that's yeah, exactly, because it hasn't, like, let's just do this and just move past this.
Yeah. I found over the years that we've done much better with putting women in prominent positions on the big ticket programs, that I see more women in the audience, and people come up to me and they're happy to see that. And I think what's on stage is reflected in who is in the audience and who in the community feels invited into the festival as well. So I think it's all important. And because I kind of see a festival as playing an important social and, philosophical and maybe a political function on some level too, by, the experience of change through art, that it's important to consider communities and scenes and inclusion, because if that's what we're saying we are, if that's what the strength or the force of a festival like ours is, then let's just do it.
Just move ahead. So, speaking about change and evolution, you continue to do this work with MUTEC, but you have, on a personal journey, have evolved into a different aspect of a creative self, I guess, and something that what we were talking a little bit about before you came on air. Well, DJing. Yeah. Straight up doing that. But it's been a number of years that you've been playing parties. But you had mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, and again, like, because you've had this, tremendous experience as being like a curator, DJing, of course, has an element of that, but the difference is that it's much more immediate for you as a curator, right?
Everything I've done, I played in bands too, and I was like an obsessive rehearser and like every note, and like not an improviser, like I would even forget my own songs on stage. So nervous. So having trouble being present. And programming the radio show every day was also this sort of pre-imagined, double-checked, rearranged the tracks. I became an obsessive compilation maker. I have hundreds. But all of them were like gone over with a fine-tooth comb and like rearranged. And so I started playing around with Tractor because I was not interested in all of the work of learning technique on turntables, because I would rather just play music. So it saved my life, and it was an amazing tool, and I've gotten quite good at the software and all of the little tricks. And learning how to mix better and thinking about playing for people. And the first few times that I was invited to go play weird parties by friends, I would again make the full compilation. I would test it all out. It would have like a test drive once or twice before I got in front of people. And I was just too afraid to like make a choice on the spot. And over the years, I've learned to just be like, okay, this is what I'm going to start with, and then whatever. And it's been a real joy of discovery about the immediacy of that, learning to be present myself, like in a moment, know what's happening out there, what we can do next. I don't like playing clubs. I really prefer the weirdo parties, and to have a really long amount of time to go a bunch of places. So
like hours upon hours.
9 hours, I think, is the longest one I've done. And I recently did a 7-hour one that even surprised me. But it was a total joy to have an audience, or not an audience, a group of dancers and a community of people who were super engaged too, and to not want to drop them, and whatever was happening was working, and also I could go some weird places, and I really had the best time ever.
And they were with you.
Yeah.
So, speaking of music that, like, I don't know, does that certain something to you and that you want to really, share with people, you were talking up a storm about an artist that you were obsessed with as of late. I guess for a number of years now.
Yes, for a number of years. Yeah. Her name is Beatrice Dillon. She has no social media profile at all, which I love. She does not care. But like big producers will come to her, like, Ploy and Call Super and try to do tracks with her. She's trained as a percussionist. She has a kind of an electroacoustic arty sound art side of her. And then another part of her is these kind of like worldwide rhythms, dub, a little bit of jazz thrown in, and a really singular, confident style. And so we were able to bring her to the festival last year. I got to see her again when I was in Barcelona, and I also loved it. But a few years before that, she put out this weird little album, Face A, Face B, or Face A, Face B, getting too fancy. And there's one track on this album that at a long after party with a captive engaged group of people at a certain time of night, day, whatever that is, I would drop this one. And I've done it 3 times. And every time it happens, people come up to me like, oh my God, what is this? Because it's just the right thing at the right time. And it's a bit weird.
And it's a beautiful piece of music.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into Beatrice Dillon here with Face B. Coming up next, though, we've got Roger with a live in-studio performance. Patti, thank you so very much for coming down on the show. This was a real pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
A real honor. Thank you. So here we go. MIMS Radio, Beatrice Dillon.
Music is my sanctuary.